Hello and welcome to Tech 18. I am Mohammed Adnan, and in this video we are going to discuss about the end-to-end solutions for incremental refresh. So there are a lot of questions available for incremental refresh, whether it is Power BI dataset, data flow. Data mart is pretty new, so I'm not going to cover that because this is still in preview. So once it is GA, then I will try to make a video on that as well. Because incremental refresh is the main thing nowadays is because we are getting a lots of data day by day, whether it's an IoT devices or it's a daily transaction data. So we need to capture that, but we can't able to refresh that on every single day, like 10 GB of data. So that's a huge volume of data which we are going to transfer from the server to the Power BI service. Whether it's the cost will have an impact on the resources, also it will have an impact on the internet usage. So to avoid that, Microsoft has launched a beautiful feature about incremental refresh. So this is already there since the beginning of Power BI dataset and data flow, but there are a lot of questions available, like open questions with the users while they're actually working on that. So I have taken a kind of like 12 questions on this to cover almost most of the topic. I believe that it has covered entirely things, whatever we need for incremental refresh. So we are going to cover in this course one by one about this topic. And it's a kind of quiz itself, so it will be fine helpful for you as well, so that you can also check your knowledge as we go progress one by one. So let's move on. The first thing is the agenda. What we are going to cover today is basically incremental refresh in Fabric and Power BI, right? So first question is like, what will happen before the start date in the incremental policy? And we are going to cover one by one questions here. I will just go through the agenda in the question itself. So what will happen to the old data? The dates passes by. After full refresh, if you add the data before the set date, then what will happen to that? What will happen if you change the duration of the setting after a few days? The incremental policy, if you change the policy. So will this load the additional data date like beyond future date of the configured one? What will happen if you add the additional column to the data source table? So if you edit the existing data flow or data set with incremental refresh, what will happen to the data? How to refresh a single partition inside the data flow or data set? How to add additional column with existing partitions? How to add additional partitions if required? How to delete existing partitions? And what is hybrid tables inside to this one? So I hope this covers almost every topic of incremental refresh which we need in current situations. If something is come in future, then I will try to add those slides as well. So moving on to the first question. So what will happen before the start date in the incremental policy? If you look into this image here, we have set up the incremental refresh policy on daily sales table, and the setup policy is archive data starting 2 years before the refresh date. And the data import from this has given an option for us to understand how it will fetch the data. From 1st of January 2021 to July 23, 2023. So this is the inclusion of the data which will cover for the archive one. And incrementally, it will refresh for the last 4 days, which is before refresh date. It has given an option here like 7th July 24 to 27 July, which is for the current date. So this is an example what it has given here. Now, what will happen if we have a set up the incremental policy as per the image? The real data we have from 2020 onwards. So then the data period to 2021, which we have configured here, which is showing up here, what will happen to those data, whether it will upload to the Power BI service or not. So I have given an option here, yes or no. You can guess your answers. You can guess your answer or you can comment in the chat box. The answer is no, because we have archived and we have configured the incremental policy to get data from the last 2 years, and it has taken it from the 2021 itself. So whatever the data which you have prior to 2021 January, it is not going to capture from your source to Power BI service. It will be remains on the source itself. So you need to make sure what is the duration you are going to configure, that you need to configure here. I know you will have a further questions inside to this topic. I hope with the next questions following up, you'll get all your clarity. So please bear with me. So this actually applicable to data flow as well as data set. So I have given it here this yellow box here, which actually gives the clarity about whether this is applicable to data flow itself or dataset itself or both of them. So the explanation is we haven't configured that, so that's why we are not able to get the data. Moving on to the next slide. So what will happen to the old data? The dates passes by. So if we have a setup incremental policy as per the image, it's the same image which I'm going to follow up on every slide. So if we move from 23rd July 2023 to 24, so 1 year passes by, then will this keep the data of 2021? Because in the previous slide, we discussed about that we have configured only for the last 2 years. So it is not going to configure 2020 data because we have only 2021 onwards. So as we move from 2023 to 2024, what will happen to the 2021 data? Whether it will be available on Power BI service or it will not. So the explanation is basically it will not. So the reason for that is it is a rolling data archive and incremental refresh. So if you see here, archive data starting from before refresh date. So before refresh date means if we are now 2024 minus 2 years we have configured, so it will be remains only for 2021, not 2022, not for 2021, because it is going to delete the data and it will just keep for the last 2 years of the data. So that's it. So you need to also make sure about how you are going to configure the data. So this again applicable to data flow as well as the data set. Moving on, after a full refresh, if we add the data before the state date, then what will happen? As we are aware that if you configure a Power BI incremental refresh and publish into Power BI service, then it will refresh all the data, whatever the configured period is from the last 2 years, entirely to Power BI service, and then it will start rolling up for the last 4 days. If you have set up the policy, incremental policy as per the image, will it update or add the new data which is in the archive period? So let's say, for example, you have made some changes on your transaction data for the period of 2022 December. So the duration what we have it here from 1st of January 2021 to July 23. So during these 2 periods, it's the archive data what we are saying. So if you made any changes to the archive data, whether it will refresh or not. So the answer is for this one is basically no. So the reason for that is whatever that new or modified data available during the archive period is not going to refresh that. So it will incremental refresh period. What we have set up here is the last 4 days. Only within these 4 days, if we have any data changes or any addition of the data, then it will reflect on the Power BI service. If it is prior to these dates, which is on the archive period, then it's not going to refresh the data. So you also need to make sure how much frequency of data you need to do it here. So the reason for this is, for example, if we are a financial company or any company for the financial data, definitely they are going to go back to the old date and then make some changes to the transaction data. So if that's the case, then you need to keep the period of at least for the 1 month or 1 year as per your convenience. So you also need to make sure about you're not going to give full length of this one, because if you give like 2 years of the data to be incremental refresh, and it's again the load for the Power BI service to daily refresh 2 years of the data. So you need to minimize this duration, and also you need to make sure that it's not going to affect your real problem. This again applicable to the data flow as well as the data set. So by default, it will not refresh, but if you want to refresh manually, then we have an option about XMLA endpoint, which is a feature in Power BI Premium. Then we can make use of that feature, and then we can refresh the partitions manually. So hope you are aware of the partition. The partition is nothing but whenever we do the incremental refresh, Power BI split up the data into multiple partitions, which I will going to show you at the end of this session that how it will look like. So we can go and manually refresh each and every single partition to avoid this full load and all the load again, so that we can refresh only those partitions which we need to refresh the period. So let's say, for example, if we have made the changes on the 31st March 2022, then you can just go to that particular partition and then refresh the data. You don't need to refresh everything all at once again. So that's the beauty of here. So you can make use of this XMLA endpoints. But for this, you need a premium license. And the next question, what will happen if we change the duration settings after a few days? So right now we are set up here for the 2 years of the data and 4 years to be incremental, 4 days to be incremental refresh. And now based on the last slide, now you are thinking about, oh no, we have not configured it right way. We have to configure it this way. Like you want to configure for the last 3 years, and this you want to refresh every 1 month, incremental refresh. So what will happen to that? The data existing available on Power BI, data flow and data set. Will it delete and redo the partitions, or it will just keep on updating automatically? The answer for this is Yes, it will delete the data entirely, and then it will reload the data completely from Power BI, from your source to the Power BI service. So why the reason is any changes will delete and recreate the partition with full refresh. So incremental refresh, if you change the policy, then Power BI doesn't aware of entirely what the changes what we have made. So as a default setting, it will just delete the partitions and it will redo all the things here. So you also need to make sure about you are not going to change frequently these things, because if we have a huge amount of the data like 10 GB or 20 GB of the data, then it's going to be make a problem for you and it will not even refresh the data sometimes because of your capacity issues. So you need to make sure about configuring all these things initially before you're starting up these Power BI things. So it will bring all the data and new modified data as well. So like we have seen in the previously, so once it will redo, delete and recreate the partitions and bring all the data again. So whatever the changes which you have made, if it is on the archive data or in the incremental refresh period, so everything it will bring up the new data as well as modified data into Power BI service. So we have a point here. So it will load all the data again. It means it will bring all the new changes. What you have done here, it will bring everything into Power BI service. Okay, the next thing, what will this load additional data dates like beyond the date today's future date? So for example, if you have set up this kind of thing, and let's assume that we are today on 27th of July 2023, and if we set up the incremental policy like this, and we have a planning data which is for the future year. So will this upload this that data as well? Because we have configured the planning till 2025 and it is available on this particular table as well. So will this upload into Power BI service or not? So the answer is no, it will not. So basically, it will restrict the data, whatever you have configured here. And then if for the past 4 days, means from current date to the past 4 days only it will refresh. Right? So current date is basically 27th July. So it will only pick the data till 27th of July. Even if you have data till 2030, 2025, it doesn't matter. So it will go one by one day and it will just pick up those days during the incremental refresh period. This again applicable to data flow and data set, both of them. So next question is, what will happen if we add additional column to the data source table? So we have set up everything and it is running smoothly. And now there is a requirement change from the business that we need to add this column to this table. Then what will happen? So will this load the additional column automatically into the data flow or data set? The answer to this one is no. So it will only refresh the existing schema, because when we load the Power BI service and if you refresh the data, then usually whatever the existing column what we have is going to refresh only those data. It's not going to add any additional data. If we need to add any additional data, then we need to edit the data flow or we need to edit the data set and then in Power Query basically, and then we need to refresh it one more time manually. Then we can able to publish it again. It is going to bring the new column as well. So now you may think about whether this will bring again the whole data or not. We'll watch in the next slide. So if we edit the existing data flow or data set with the incremental refresh, what will happen? Will this delete the pre-partition and redo these things, or it will just adjust those things automatically? Because that's a new column, right? It's not going to change any data. So the answer for this one is yes. It will delete the partition and redo all the things once again. So it will reload from the source to the Power BI service again the whole thing. So you also need to make sure about which column you need to specify at the beginning of this one itself. So if you want to avoid a full refresh, then we need to use XMLA endpoints and ALM toolkit and also SSMS or Tabular editor. This is only applicable for the data set, not for the data flow. Because in the data set, we can able to see the partitions using these tools like SSMS and Tabular editor. But in data flow, we cannot, because data flow actually stores data into Azure Data Lake storage too, and we don't have access to that. Even though if we have this own capacity stored, if you're using a premium license, and if you're bringing up your own data lake storage, Gen 2, then there may be possibilities that you can make use of that. But I'm not sure on that whether it is really applicable to that or not. But in general, that is not possible for data flow, and it is possible for data flow with this workaround. We are going to cover those workarounds in our next slides as well. So next question is, can we refresh a single partition inside the data flow or data set? So we have two options, data flow and data set. For the data flow, we cannot, like I said before on the previous slide, it is stored on the data lake storage Gen 2, so we don't have visibility for that. For data set, we can do that. Also explained on the previous slide, we can make use of the SSMS or SQL Server Management Studio or the Tabular editor. So data flow are stored in managed in data lake storage. So we cannot do that. For XMLA endpoints, we can use SSMS and Tabular editor for data set. And for this, we need to connect to Power BI dataset using this XMLA endpoint link in SSMS or Tabular editor. And then we need to run this script by selecting that partition. It is going to refresh that particular partition. We'll share this link if required for you. And the next question is, can we add additional column to the existing partitions? So previously we have seen that can we add additional column to the data. So it's refresh the whole thing. Now the question is, can we add additional column to existing partitions? So in the data flow, no, we need to do a full refresh. We don't have visibility, so we had to do a full refresh. For the Power BI dataset, yes, we can. For this, basically, again, we need to use the XML endpoint and ALM toolkit. So if you remember about the tools which I'm talking up here, ALM toolkit, SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio, and Tabular editor. So these three things are mostly useful for this incremental refresh with XML endpoint. So these things are basically a premium feature. The tools are free, but the XML endpoint is a premium feature. For dataset, use ALM toolkit to deploy the schema with option to select for table, update, retain partitions, validate the selection, and then update. And refresh using SSMS tablet editor, partition by partition, manually, you can do that. I'm going to show you that after this slides. So the next question is, can we add additional partitions if required? So let's assume that we have configured till 2021 here, and if we want to have 2020 data, then what we can do? We can't able to do the full refresh again. It will take a lot of time. Instead of that, can we add an additional partitions directly? So for the data flow, we cannot do that because again, it's going to the same thing. It is stored on data lake storage Gen 2. We cannot do that. And for the data set, we can do that. So for this, we need to use again the XML endpoint or SSMS and Tabular editor. So just duplicate, the easiest way we can do is like we can just duplicate the existing partition and then modify the date range within that and run the above script which you have seen in the previous slides. By selecting the partition, it's going to load data from your source to Power BI service only for this period. For example, 2020 of the data. That's amazing. It's not like everything is not possible. Things are possible, and we have different ways to do that. For data flow thing, I'm still not clear, but even though I'm saying it here, no, maybe it will come in future or it will be available on any other way, but I'm not aware of that. The next question is how to delete the existing partitions. So if you have set up a policy for this image and we want to delete some data partition which is not required for us, then can we do that? For data flow, again, it's not applicable, so we can't able to do that. For the data set, yes, we can do that. It's basically again the same thing. We need to use XML endpoint plus SSMS or Tabular editor. So right click the partition and delete. So if you delete, it will not affect the data in Power BI service. Select any one partition, run the above script which you have seen on the previous slide by selecting any one partition. So we need to refresh it here, then only it's going to affect on the Power BI service. The next thing is the last thing, which is I like the most, which is hybrid table. So hybrid table, the beauty of this is we can get the best of both the worlds, which is the direct query as well as the import mode. So the incremental refresh is basically the import mode itself. But by adding the hybrid table, we have an option for the direct query as well. So we can archive the old data and then we have latest data as a direct query. And also we can switch around between these. But here I'm just showing you the usual way, which is incremental refreshing for the last 2 years and archiving for the last 2 years, incremental refresh for the last 4 days. And then we have option here, get the latest data in real time with direct query, premium only feature. So this is basically for the pro license, you can get that, but XML endpoint and this hybrid tables are the premium features. So what we need to do here is the third option, what we have here, get the latest data in real time with direct query premium only. So once you enable this one, this will actually convert into 26th of July, and this will convert from 27th of July onward. If we are on 27th of July as the current date. So it will just keep this current day as a kind of directory mode, and whatever the dates previously to that, it will keep as an incremental refresh mode. So that's the thing. We can do it these things in data flow, which is not possible, but for the data set, we can do that. So that's what I mentioned up here. So now you may think about what about these two things. As I'm into this page, I will also show you that. So only refresh complete days. So this basically the incremental refresh topic. So if you have a policy like if you want to refresh only the complete days of the data and you don't want to refresh it on half day of the data, because for example, if you have a manufacturing company and you want to check only the data which happened for the last day, which is for the previous day, is complete now, and you want to refresh today like in the 7 a.m. in the morning. You don't want to capture whatever data which is received from 12 a.m. in the morning to the 7 a.m. in the morning for current date. You just want the data to be for the last date. So in that case, for the previous day, in that case. So in that case, you can take this option. It will just pick the data only till the last date. Right now, for example, here we are on 27th, then it will just pick the data only till 26th onwards. It will not pick the data from 27. That's one thing. And if you enable this option by default, it will take this option that so that it will just pick the data 1 day prior to this as an incremental refresh. And the latest data can be on the current date here. And what about the detect data changes? So this will basically, even though if you set up these policies here, and if there is a change in the data, then only it's going to refresh that. So there's an additional benefit to that because if you're refreshing in the past 4 days, for example, and if there is no change in the data, then it will not refresh the data itself. So that will save this refresh period unnecessarily. So you can also make use of that. And here at the bottom, it has given a diagram about this is a 2-year period and this is the 4 day of the incremental refresh. This is for the archive and this is for the real time for the current day. So that's how you can able to configure that. And this is applicable only for the data set, not for the data flow. And this we need to configure in Power BI tester. Now, where we can get this XMLA link? I have talked a lot about XMLA link, so where we can get it? Basically, you need to go to the settings of the data set, how we are seeing on the image, and then under the server settings, you have the option connection string. From this, you can copy this. This is only applicable for Power BI data set. And now, how can we use it on a different tools like SSMS, Tabular Editor, and LM Toolkit? So in SSMS, basically, the link which you have copied is the complete link which is here on the Tabular Editor. You just need to copy from Power BI until this workspace, which is the workspace name, and copy and paste it on the server name here. And make sure you select the server type as an analysis services because the data set is analysis services behind the scene. So you have to select this one. And then you need to select your authentication and you need to pass your email ID for this. For Tabular Editor, you just need to copy the entire link over here and you need to select your authentication to be username and password. And then you are done with that. And finally, we have this LM toolkit. For this, you need to directly just copy this link and the workspace and dataset, you need to pass the dataset name, the initial catalog equal to this one, right? So this is basically the dataset name. You need to copy this dataset and then paste it here. So this is how you can able to connect to the multiple sources. Now we have seen these things here. So let's really see how it actually looks like. So you need to pass the link here in the server name, and then you need to select first of all the server type to be analysis services, and authentication to be universal MFA, and then you need to pass your username and password. So once you click on connect, this will sometimes open up the pop-up window to authenticate. You can authenticate that, and once you do so, then it's going to open up on the object browser. This is what you have. Power BI, the link here, and the database. If you expand this one, whatever the database which is available, which is the dataset basically, available on that workspace, it's going to show up here. So whatever the dataset which is available inside of this workspace, it's going to list out here. And here, this is the one which I have added here in hybrid or SQL. So for example, if I open up any one of this one, so it will expand the tables here and it will give me the list of available tables inside of this. And here, if I right click on this one and then click on partitions, this will actually give me the list of partitions. If you look at these partitions, how we have configured to configure for the last 2 years of the data as an archive and the recent date for the last 4 days to be as a kind of incremental refresh. So for the complete year, if it is passes by, then it has converted that into a partition, which is for 2021 complete year partition, 22 complete year as a one partition. And for the current year, 2023, it has split up into Few things. One is quarter 1 and quarter 2, because right now we are on quarter 3 as a kind of calendar quarter. So for the calendar quarter, current quarter, it is spread into single day here. So year partition, quarter partition, and daily partition. To see for this July, it has completely these number of partitions here. That's an amazing here. So also one more thing you notice here is the number of rows. So how much rows we have the data on the particular partition. And this is the last process here. Never nothing means it will just load the initial load. After that, we have not processed any partitions manual refresh. And if you look at into here, I have refreshed this on this date and I have refreshed this on this date. That's an example here. And when you want to refresh any particular partition, then you need to click here and then click on this one process. So once you click on that, it's going to open up a new window. Here, this gives the list of, again, the same list of particles, and you need to tick box here, which are the partition you want to refresh. So here we have the multiple modes here. For example, we have the modes like process default, full, data, clear, and add. So the default is nothing but load data into unprocessed partitions or tables, hierarchy, relationship, and calculate column for affected tables or updated. So if you want to just do the full process, you can select here, loads data into all partitions or tables, hierarchy, relationship, and calculate columns for all tables or updated. And process data, load only the data into the partition table. This is what I mentioned about earlier. So we can just load only a single data if we want to make any changes to the data. So if you want to process, clear the data, remove all the data from the partitions or tables or database. And process add, incrementally load data into the partitions or table. This is what you can add additional data inside to that. So this is how you can configure and then click on OK. This is going to refresh the data in Power BI service. And it will reflect automatically into Power BI service. That's a beautiful thing. And then click on cancel. So this is what we can see here. And if you open up this Tabular editor, it's the same process. You can click here and then open model, and then from DB. Here also we need to pass the entire link and need to select here username and password, which I will give you here. So this is open up a new window, and if you notice one thing here, it has given the ID, name, compatibility, last date, and the description. In the compatibility, you see here it has given as 1550 and 1565. So basically, the hybrid table is a new feature, right? So the hybrid actually 1565 the compatibility, and 1550 is for the regular incremental refresh table. So I will select on this one, both of them basically. We'll select first of all the regular one, click on OK. Meanwhile, I will open another Tabular editor. And let's connect again to the same here so that we'll connect to the other thing here. So now I will select to this one, Azure Hybrid SQL. So here it has opened up this window for Azure SQL Hybrid. And if I expand the tables, and if I expand the daily sales table, we have the option about partition. If I expand this one, it's the same partition what we have seen on XML, it has show up here. But the only difference here is on the last one. The last one, which is we have configured this for the hybrid. Actually, the one which has seen on the XML is basically the regular one without the hybrid table. And this is the hybrid table one where we have this option about this onward. So onward basically refers to the hybrid table, and if it is not without the on, and if it is without the onward, then it means it's a regular incremental refresh table. So that's the difference between this and that 1550 and 1565 partitions. Somehow it is not offering the old one, but it's still I can able to show you this one. Both of them will look similar. Only difference is the last part. So now to refresh this any one of the partition, we just need to select the partition and copy paste the script what I have given on the C# script tab. So there are two tabs here, expression editor and C# script. So expression editor is basically we can use for the DAX calculations, and if we want to do some advanced thing, we need to use the C# script. So here I have used this one C# script, and then I have pasted this C# script. on the C# script tab. So if you see here, this is basically the name of the partition, and the duration what it has shown here is basically from 7th of last process is 26th July, and default, and also the import mode, and also ends on this date. So this is basically the refresh period what it has given. And if you want to refresh here, just paste here and then run this script. So this is going to run this script, and you will see the difference here. Right now this is showing as 26th of July 3 p.m. and if I go back to the other, this is also the same period what I have here. Let me minimize this a bit so that we can have an easy look. And if I zoom in here, so this is for the 3:07 p.m. and if I look back again for this data set, and now you see the date time has changed from 29th of July 10:30 a.m. which is the time now. So it has refreshed this particular partition. This is how we can able to refresh a single partition manually in Tabular editor. The same thing applies also for SSMS. And if you want to delete a partition, you can just right click here and then we have option to delete. And if you want to add a new partition like 2020, so right click this 2021 partition and click on duplicate here. So this is going to create a copy of this one. And here you can just right click here and then you can double click also here, or else you can click here to rename this one. I'm just changing it to 2020. And also we need to define the period. So end and start period. So I'm just changing the start period to start from 2020 January and the beginning of this to be 2021. So this is how the period is. And now we need to refresh this one. So if you want to refresh, same thing, select this partition, use the same script. And here's the thing which we have here, selected partition. So that's the thing which you can use here. I have to select here, use this script and then click on run. So this will run this one. We need to select, not select the script, just we had to paste the script and then click on run here. So this is going to refresh this particular partition and then it will give you the message here. So the script executed successfully. So that's good. And here last process is set to be blank here. If you just move to the another partition and come back here, now you see it has given me the timing here 29th of July, which is current data and time here. So right now this data set is also has the data from 2020 onwards. If you just go back to Power BI service now, and we'll have a look into that. I have refreshed this Azure SQL hybrid one. Okay, this is the one, right? So if I click on this one, and right now this is showing as this has refreshed just before. The timing which you are seeing up here on Tabular editor is basically the UTC time, and this is the Indian time zone. So right now I have refreshed this data set just before, so it has refreshed here. So to cross verify that, let me click on any of the partition again and then hit the refresh. This is now set to 3:07 p.m. on the UTC here. And if I go back and come back here, now it is showing up 10:35 a.m. And if I come back here, let me refresh this. Right now, my computer time is 4:05 p.m. and just want to make sure whether it is reflecting it here or not. Yeah, if you see here, it is just showing up here 4:05 p.m. So that's a good thing. And if I go back here and open up the report, we'll see whether we have the data of 2020 or not. On the top, you see we have the data of 2020 here. That's really amazing. So we have since from the beginning. So the next thing is if I delete one partition, let's say for example, if I delete this partition again 2020 and I have not done anything. So if I refresh these visuals here, this is still showing me 2020 data because it is not affected on Power BI service. So I need to click on any one of the visual, any one of the partition, and then again run this script. So once I run this script, let's just finish this script. Yeah, it has done here. And if I just refresh this browse icon, I mean refresh the visuals here without refreshing the browser, now you see it is just showing up from 2021. So that's a good thing. So this is how we can able to refresh the partition, create a partition, delete a partition using XMLA endpoint in Tabular editor. The same thing you can do it on SSMS as well. Now let's have a look into this ALM toolkit. This is the Power BI report. Basically for ALM toolkit, Power BI desktop. So external tools, we need to install that and then click on ALM toolkit. And here the target must be the Power BI service and the source has to be the local machine, which is Power BI desktop version. So I need to bring that here. So let me open up here. So this is the window of this ALM toolkit. And the source here I'm selected here to be Power BI desktop. And the source here I'm selected here to be Power BI desktop. And the target is basically this Power BI service one. And then if I click on OK, it's going to connect here. And let me bring up that window as well. All right, so this is the window of ALM toolkit here. If I expand this, okay, this is the one, this is good. So on the left, we have this source, which is Power BI desktop version, and on the right, we have the Power BI service version. So it has comparing each and everything, and you see it here action, which is it has given an option whether we need to update it here. So there are a couple of options here. We update or skip. So update is basically it will update into this target. Skip is basically it will skip that one. So here it has given some error here. If you click on that particular step, then this will give me this message here. This is the change what it has given here. It has changed the source from this to that one. So if you want to do that, you can also do that. We have this column available on Power BI service, but not on the Power BI desktop version. So that's the thing which it has given here. If you want to update, you can also update that. But for our case, just to update the schema, we need to just select these options here under options. And this is the one thing which we need to maintain, which is for table update, retain partition. So this we need to make sure that update this one, and then we can validate the selections. And finally, if you want to update it, we can update the data. So once you click on validate selection after ticking that option, it gives the option here, update table, daily sales table, retain target partition applied. So this is the same target partitions which we are seeing on SSMS, same partitions here, right? Okay. Click on OK, and this will be enable this update option. If you click on update, then it's going to update the Power BI desktop to Power BI service. That's the thing. I hope you have covered most of the topics and you got almost all the clarity for incremental refresh in Power BI data flow and dataset. Thanks for watching and keep learning. See you in the next course.